Well, week 2 of spring practice is in the books, including their first scrimmage this last Saturday. So what did we learn from 2 weeks of practice so far and Rhule's first ever scrimmage as a Husker head coach? And if y'all don't mind, please stay until the end, as I have some really bad news I need to tell everyone. So if you can, hang around. If for some reason you can't hang around, before you go, maybe jump to the end and hear that out, as to me it's really important, extremely important, that everyone kind of knows what's going on. Now, back to the practice. After 2 weeks of practice, kind of what have we learned? I know one thing that kind of stuck out, mainly during the scrimmage, was Rhule included the quarterbacks in live action, and I kind of like this. So everybody got to go. Everybody was, hit and be hit, if you know what I mean. Which, like I said, I'm glad to see. I mean, that's how we always got prepared for gameplay. There was none of this laying off the quarterback or anything like that. We went all out. Nothing prepares you better than repetition over and over again of game day situation, and you don't get that if you're going in there and playing two-hand touch. And I understand there's injuries. I know somebody's going to come back and say if someone gets hurt, see if they didn't play, they wouldn't have got hurt. If you're not properly prepared because you're not taking any quality reps, then what's the difference? We have the depth, and especially at quarterback, we have the depth that we could do this. Plus, Coach Osborne dealt with injuries all the time, and probably more than you think. You don't think of it back when you had players that just the next man came up. It was always next man up, and we didn't really miss a beat too much. Where when you're struggling winning and all that, then it kind of sticks out. What I took out of Rhule's response on the quarterbacks was that he seemed to be really impressed with all of them. He talked about how each one has their own strengths and weaknesses, and that's another reason why you got to play live. A lot of them, their strengths could be running. They might throw better off their run, that threat of run. And if you don't give the defense that threat where they got to account for that quarterback taking off and you got to actually tackle them and hit them, then it's going to be easier for them to cover, and then you're not going to get a real good evaluation on the quarterback. It also seemed that the defense, he seemed to be pretty impressed with the defense. He said the defense was doing a good job getting after the quarterbacks, making the quarterbacks scramble. It seemed like besides the quarterback scrambling out of there and breaking a couple long runs, that the defensive line did pretty well. And like I said before, Satterfield and Rhule really like that aspect of having that running quarterback. It gives another aspect to the game and another worry for the defense to prepare for during their week of preparation. So, and the only way to practice what they really want to see in a game is to actually make the quarterbacks go live. And that way they could also see who does what. Kind of gives them an early evaluation. They're not trying to evaluate really anyone right now, but it kind of sees what they have, what they've learned. So he really had no choice but to open it up and let the quarterbacks go all out. And for what I saw, they all looked good, pretty decent, good for mainly early spring. Like I said, each one has their own strengths and weaknesses. Rhule also actually said the offense probably is ahead of the defense, which is kind of shocking. Usually at the beginning of the season, even when you get to the fall, the defense is usually ahead of the offense because the offense takes a little more rhythm where defense is reading and reacting. So it kind of surprised me a little bit to hear that the offense was ahead of the defense. But that tells you a couple of things. It tells you either one, the offense is better than we were thinking, or the defense maybe is in more trouble than we think. It's probably, if I had to guess, it's probably the offense is a little better than most of us thought, because you're probably like me. The offense looked so bad at times last year. We're to the point now, we don't want to hear it, we want to see it. You know, the offense was supposed to be decent and pretty good last year. Remember, the offense was supposed to help out the defense, but you saw at times they struggled a lot. So I think we're all to that point. Prove it to us before we believe it. I really believe the offense is going to be more productive and better than definitely better than last year. But I think we're really going to see it. He also made the remark he had Big Ten officials in officiating the scrimmage. So that's another good thing, because you actually bring in the officials you will be seeing in the season. Well, at least some of them. And he said they actually only had a couple of penalties, which to me speaks louder than you think, because it usually takes a few reps and scrimmages, especially throughout the spring and fall camps, before mistakes kind of get eliminated, or you stop making them dumb mistakes. So either the officials were being really lenient, or the team has grown even more than, like I said, than we thought in the off season. So let's hope it's the latter there, and they've actually improved more than we think. It sounds like the quarterbacks did have a couple of turnovers, which is expected. He also talked about that the team practiced before the scrimmage at the Hawk Center. They worked on things like the 2-minute drill, third down situations, special teams, and red zones, which is usually a daily practice. If you ever watch games and at the games, whoever wins like special teams, your third downs, turnover battles, that's usually who wins the game. So that's something that we always practice. That was almost a daily thing. You practice that over and over again each day, to the point where it comes second nature and it comes natural to you. When you get in that situation and you're not having to think about it, you're actually doing what you need to do. Because in my days, it was a must to be really efficient in those areas to do that. He really talked about how pleased he was with the whole team in general, and how much the team is learning, especially the quarterbacks. Stating that they're picking things up and getting things done. And, again, it's hard to say with the few practices they have, but that's a good sign to hear. Rhule was also pleased with the offensive and defensive line play, which is what I was really looking forward to, is seeing how they did. He talked about how the D-line got after the ball, pressured the quarterback, had great pass coverage, to the point he gave the quarterbacks had to keep scrambling out of there, which they did have a couple of big runs, which is expected when you have mobile quarterbacks. And I think all our quarterbacks are pretty mobile. So it seemed to be, and he seemed to be impressed also with the offensive line during the scrimmage, which is it's good to hear. But if the D-line was getting after the quarterback, and the quarterbacks are having to scramble out of there, even though they're getting some big runs, it's going to make the offensive line look good, because your rushing numbers are going to be up. But if that's the case, and the D-line was getting after them, and he's talking about how impressed they were getting after the quarterback, then it's hard for me to believe the O-line was impressive, because to me, you can't have both. You can't have the offensive line being impressive doing their job, but the D-line's doing their job when they're going against each other. So one has to give if one's going to be impressive. So kind of taking that with a grain of salt. Remember, we used to hear it all the time with Frost and all that. Oh, practice looked good. Oh, they're looking good. Then we get to game time and they fall flat on their back. So I think a lot of us are taking this with a grain of salt and waiting to see what's game day going to be like. And good and well that first game against Minnesota is going to tell us a lot. Doesn't mean we have to win it. It's going to be nice if we win it, but it is going to be Rhule's first game, all these coaches' first game. the offense's first game, the new 3-3-5 defense first. So you're going to have a lot of firsts in that game where Minnesota comes in here established, same coaches, same offense, and also we're playing on the road in Minnesota. So that I just want to see them play well and then clean up the mistakes that they will have during that first game. Rhule also seemed to be pretty impressed with redshirt freshman offensive lineman Justin Evans Jenkins. He talked about how Jenkins is coming in here and getting the work done, really looking good, and that's a good sign to hear when you talk about the offensive line. He did state that center Ben Scott got rolled up on, I believe, last Thursday, so he'll be out for a week or two. It's nothing serious, he said, but don't expect him out there. Other than that, he said the team actually came out pretty healthy. Rhule again talked about how these kids are grinding it out right now, that the team is getting great competition work, good looks and reps at different positions. So it looks like these reps are paying off, especially when you're rotating these positions, because you think about it, if you're playing just your one position, you go in there and get your reps, then the next unit goes in, you're not doing anything. But if now you're rolling over there and now playing DB, or DB's playing wide receiver, you're getting more reps. And yes, it's at a different position, but you're still getting reps. Plus you're seeing the offense and the defense in a different light. If you're playing wide receiver and now you're playing DB, you kind of now get to study what the DBs are looking for. So if you end up being at wide receiver, you know kind of what they're going to be looking at, and you could change your philosophy or actually become a better player. Or vice versa, if you end up rolling over to the defensive backside with you playing wide receiver all them years, then that's actually going to help you. It's really good that this is what we're hearing. Rhule also stated, he was talking about last Tuesday's practice. He stated that traditionally that the Tuesday after that very first week is usually the roughest on the guys right after, because one, you're running on adrenaline that first week. And I'm sure the coaches, especially being new here, was, let me say, easing their way into things that first week and not, slamming them to them like you do when you finally get into it. Probably kind of like, remember when first week of school, you never did a whole lot, but after that it took off, and the rest of the year was what it was. And I'm sure because they only get 15 practices for the spring, and being brand new offense, new defense, there's a lot to teach in such a short time. So I'm really sure they jammed it all in and took off this week. So that's probably another reason why. And then 15 practices actually includes scrimmages, which is the spring game is considered a scrimmage. A lot has changed since I played. Back then we went all out in the wintertime, summertime, springtime, fall time. You really couldn't tell a big difference in them with what you did and how much you did, except the 2 days when they came around, you knew what them days were. But winter and spring was packed with practices as well as workouts. So a lot of rules have changed since back when I played. We also even heard from quarterback Jeff Sims earlier in this week, and he made the comment it was just business as usual. He talked about this being his 4th year, so to him it was just going into another practice, and that's a good sign to hear. He did kind of make the comment that it's taken him getting used to on the cold weather. That's probably his biggest obstacle right now for him, which I guess is a good sign if that's your biggest concern and it's not anything else football-wise. But it seems like he's pretty comfortable what he's doing, and even though he's at a different school, different offense and all that, to him it's just second nature, probably more to him than the new guys coming in here. I also noticed how buff Jeff looked. Sims really looked in shape, worked out, as he physically looks to be the most physical and the strongest of the quarterbacks. He's definitely the biggest of the quarterback in that quarterback room, and that's including Casey Thompson. I also noticed watching him throw and run that Sims definitely has the tangibles to run and throw, because as we watched him throw, he actually looked better to me than he did on his Georgia Tech film. So he's definitely going to give Casey a run for his money. But don't count Casey out, because I know Casey will be just as ready, but I'm sure that injury and surgery on his shoulder, now he has to rest it, that's really putting him behind, where Sims gets to go all out and take off early. Rhule did state earlier in the week that Casey was working his butt off, learning the offense, learning the system. He's out there early with the guys, and he's even, helping with the quarterbacks, kind of being another coach out on the field. He did throw a few small, short passes throughout the week, but it wasn't in a practice aspect, if you know what I mean. It was more of a medical therapy kind of way, so I wouldn't take anything into it. But Rhule did state that Casey should be released soon to be able to participate more. But I wouldn't expect too much. If I know Rhule, he's probably going to hold Casey off until the summer to give his shoulder more time to heal. Casey's actually wearing a yellow number 11 jersey with no pads, which means no practicing. Sims is actually wearing the traditional green jersey, the number 14, which tells everyone else no touchy for, no tackling. Except, like I said, in that scrimmage game, he actually opened up and let them, get after everybody, the quarterbacks. So the quarterbacks were live in the scrimmage, and it really gave everybody a good look of everybody, not just the quarterbacks. Because, you might be able quick enough to go in there and touch him, but was you good enough to tackle him? So, and let's talk about the running back room. Again, Rhule bragged about the running back room. He's really impressed with our running backs in this running back room. And I will say that's probably the deepest, the most talented position we have right now. Probably starting with Anthony Grant. Grant was back on the practice field this last week. I think he came back a week ago from Saturday. So he did get to practice. I did notice that Grant did look a little smaller. Like he kind of leaned down a bit during the winter conditioning, maybe to gain some speed. Really hard to say right now. Rhule's still bragging about Gabe Urban. He does that almost on every conference, every time he talks about the running backs. And if I had to guess right now, Urban probably has the edge over Grant for starting, but it's really too early to say, even though he does bring up Urban a lot. To me, Grant's earned it in games. Urban is maybe doing well in practice, but he hasn't done it in a game yet. So Anthony gets my vote because he's proven it in games already. But that's going to be a great battle. And if it's going to be as close as we think it is, and we end up coming out there with two really great number one backs, Grant and Urban, that's going to be great. And it's going to be music to Rhule's ears. I mean, A.J. Allen is looking good too. Yeah, he broke off a couple long runs during the week, during practice. Still got that speed and agility. Man, it's what I do expect to see. I do expect to see Rhule run a 1-2 punch with Grant and Urban being that number one back. Either one, pounding it, and then bringing in A.J. For your finesse, quick back to slip through them small holes in the line. And I know Rhule's hoping that this room comes together, and it looks like it really is, that the team will be able to pound it out with Grant or Urban, or maybe even both during the fourth quarters of every game to close them out. Instead of us blowing double-digit leads like we saw last year, we went in there, I know a couple times with double-digit leads in the fourth quarter and ended up blowing the game. So he also made the comment that Ramir Johnson is taking reps at wide receiver, and that there are a couple of guys that are actually playing on both offense and defense. They get to wear the gray jerseys. So if you're out there and see someone in a gray jersey, that means they're playing both sides of the ball. One of them is A.J. Rollins. A.J. is playing his normal tight end position, but I was also taking reps at defensive lineman, and Rhule actually stated that A.J. Rollins is actually leading the group, defensive lineman group, in sacks, and believes that's Rollins' best position for his future.
but did state he don't make any one change, so it's really up to Rollins if that's where he wants to go. Julian Martin is another player that is taking reps on both sides of the ball. Julian is still playing his normal defensive back position, but he's also taking reps at wide receiver. Rhule also talked about just how open the players are and willing to try different positions that the coaches suggest and are just willing to learn. So it's really good to see. I think a lot of it had to do with, man, they were just tired of the losing ways. So and they've seen Rhule do it in the past and has proven it with other players, at Baylor and stuff. So I think they're more willing to listen to him. The biggest thing is all the players are really trying so hard to not make a mistake, he said. But like I've always said, making mistakes and correcting them is how you succeed and become a great football team. The key is not to make them same mistakes over and over again. Now, Rhule did talk about the coaches clinic they put on this last weekend with Coach Osborne giving the presentation. He talked about how much he's learned from Coach Osborne. He took a lot of notes. He said that coach was just full of intelligence and knowledge. Especially was amazed how Coach Osborne took, just spit this stuff out and gave this information and still knew what he was talking about at 86 years old. There's an 86-year-old man, and looks like, he has the intellect to still and the recollect to come out and do what he needed to do if he had to. He also brought up they had probably about 400, almost 400 high school coaches from all over the country at this clinic. He then discussed Frank Solich coming in, giving a speech. He gave a story about when he first started out and he was offensive coordinator. When Rhule was offensive coordinator at Temple, he faced Frank Solich a couple times, and it sounded like a couple times in the championship games, while Frank Solich was the head coach at Ohio. And he talked about, Solich got the best of him each time. The great thing you notice about Rhule when you listen to him, that he's just old enough, he remembers them dominant years within Nebraska, and to him, he wants Nebraska the way he knows it and saw it back then. So the dominance and the great things and the tradition of this program is really what grabs him and holds on to this, and he's holding on to this and wants this to be that same program that it was and to shine again like it was. And that's good to hear. We also heard it from other coaches. We heard it from Frost. But it seems like Rhule's on the right track right now. To me, it seems that, because he kind of brought up that all these players throughout the year, yes, you might have played for Bob Devaney, you might have played for Coach Osborne or Frank Solich or even Bo Pelini or Riley or even himself. He said, yes, you might have played again with different coaches and all that, but you still all played for Nebraska and that N on your helmet, and that's what it should be all about. It shouldn't be about the coach or all that. It should be for the team itself, for the school, and that N on that helmet, which is really good to hear. But let's see how he thinks once he loses that first game and he has to answer questions on that. It's easy to be optimistic and great like he's been right now because he ain't even won a game or lost a game yet. Things are going to change once the season starts and you get that first loss, especially one you probably shouldn't have lost. Now, to recruiting news, after that big weekend a week ago, we didn't get any commitments at the time, which I guess was kind of cocky on my end, me thinking that we probably would, because I actually thought, offensive lineman Gibson Pyle or tight end Ian Flint for sure would have committed during that weekend. But it's kind of expected. I mean, especially with high 4-star or 5-star recruits, you don't usually get commitments that early. So I guess it was kind of cocky of me, especially when there was still 8 months to go before you even have the first signing day. But there were a lot of positive responses from the recruits about Lincoln and the Huskers. Two of them that stuck out was offensive lineman, the number one offensive lineman, Brandon Baker, and running back Nathaniel Frazier. Both of them are teammates, high school teammates out there in Santa Ana, California. they were both pretty impressed with their visit. And if the Huskers can get them back for the spring game or an official visit, Nebraska's got a good shot of landing one of these guys, or probably even both of these guys. It seems like both these guys want to play at the same school. So wherever they go, I wouldn't be surprised you don't see both of them go to the same place. It's going to be hard to beat out Oregon, especially with Baker, since Baker's brother actually played at Oregon, and right now I've heard Oregon has been his where he's been leaning towards. But if the Huskers could convince him to come back, look out, you never know. I know when Nebraska set up this big recruiting weekend, their goal was really to expose these recruits to the school, the city, and the facilities, because a lot of these recruits come in here like everyone else around the country, that Nebraska and Lincoln is in the middle of nowhere and surrounded by cornfields. I know one of these players, Nate Frazier, they're the running back we were talking about, expressed how extremely impressed he was with Lincoln and the team. He stated that it was a great visit, and that when he first got to Lincoln and got off the plane, he said the main thing he thought was that Nebraska was filled with cornfields, just because they're called the Corn Huskers. I thought was kind of funny, but Frazier also commented that when he researched and searched Lincoln and the history of the Huskers, that he found out that Nebraska and the Huskers was the original running back university, the position that he plays, and that he discussed that the past running backs like Mike Rozier, Amon Green, even Lawrence Phillips all dominated college football at that position, and it really surprised him and tweaked his interest more because that's his position he played. Frazier was also adamant about the resources and the facilities that the University of Nebraska has, which extends way beyond the football field. He was also impressed with the number of academic All-Americans that Nebraska has in its history. That was a big thing, mainly way back then when I played. This actually showed him that Nebraska and Lincoln is for sure a place that he could be successful at on the field as well as off the field in the classroom. Frazier also showed his appreciation towards Coach Rhule and running backs coach E.J. Bartle. He talked about how he said Rhule is a great head coach, has a great head on his shoulders, and that he's an excellent coach with high expectations. His exact words was, Coach Rhule is a genuine coach. He also talked about how Rhule is not just all about football, but he's about developing each player to the best position that fits that player, so that player can succeed at the next level in the NFL or wherever that is. So, and he knew Rhule was really good at this and doing this because he saw the history of what he did there at Baylor. Another player that was actually impressed with their visit was offensive tackle Andrew Sprague out of Kansas City, Missouri. He's a four-star offensive lineman that stands 6'8" as a junior in high school, which this is a grown man that easily could come straight in here his first year and make an impact on the offensive line. Now, Sprague was only here till Friday as he made a trip to Notre Dame on Saturday, but he's already been here a couple times now, and each time he's raved about Nebraska and the facilities. And he is another that was impressed also with Coach Rhule and what Rhule's doing right now. So the goal for the Huskers right now is to get Sprague back in for an official visit, if not for the spring game, maybe an official visit, and then maybe get Nebraska on his list of top teams when he drops it down and narrows down his teams to consider. They're trying to get Nebraska on that list. Let's talk about players that I still feel that will commit to the Huskers. Now, when, I don't know, but to me are pretty locked in, and I feel like no matter what are probably going to commit to the Huskers. Again, I already talked about him. Offensive lineman Gibson Pyle out of Klein, Texas, and tight end Ian Flint out of Katy, Texas. Both them schools are in the Houston area down in Texas. Also, another one is tight end Carter Nelson out of Ainsworth, Nebraska, and athlete Caleb Benning out of Omaha. I also feel like Mario Buford out of DeSoto, Texas. I feel like he's probably not as strong as them four, but I feel like he'll end up committing to Nebraska as well. Now, before we go again, I did state that I had some kind of bad news. As a lot of you guys know, I just started this channel about a month ago. I think my first video went up March 11th. And back on March 7th, when I recorded my first video, I was going through the video, watching the video like many of us, or many of them do on their channels. They go through their videos. And while I was watching, I noticed on the right side, if you haven't noticed, looking at my right side of my neck, there's a lump on my right side. And so I started feeling, and I could feel the lump right here. So during the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've been going to doctors and all that, getting tests. Trust me, and I know a lot of you probably didn't see it, and you didn't see me before then, but trust me, people who've been around me for years didn't see it either, unless you're really looking for it. It was really hard to see. When I was staring at my video and watching my video, I think I watched that video a couple of times before I realized, why is my right side bigger than my left, and I started feeling around. But I'm sure you're speculating correctly that I've been diagnosed now with tonsil cancer. So I'm going to be having surgery to remove the tonsil as well as the lymph nodes on April 12th. And then I'm going to have to go through some weeks of radiation and chemotherapy after that. So I'm saying this because I'm hoping you guys hang around. I don't want to lose momentum. I don't know how much this is going to do to me, as I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to create another video. What is this going to take out of me? Is that radiation chemo going to take it out of me to the point I can't even speak anymore and I can't do anymore? Or am I going to be fine and be able to jump right back on it and start creating videos? But I want everybody to know, so if you don't hear from me and all that, please don't give up on me. I really like to make this work. But again, I really don't know if the radiation and chemo is going to mess with me to the point where my speaking or however I'm going to come out. I don't know how I'm going to come out of this, but I wanted to thank everyone for being part of this channel, and I still plan on continuing the channel if I can, if I'm able afterwards. We're going to continue on, but just in case it's a couple of months before I could create anything. I hate that it's during the time of the spring game, so if I can do a video on the spring game, I'm going to post one. So if you notice me looking a little different or a little rugged, I don't know how it's going to be, you'll understand and you'll know what it is. So I want to thank everyone. Now, if you do want to help me, if some of you are thinking you'd like to help, I did start a GoFundMe page, and I put the link in the description below. But I'm not asking you guys to do it. I'm just saying, if anyone's sitting out there going, hey, I would like to help, there is a GoFundMe page, and I put that link in the description. To me, you guys just hanging around and waiting for me to come back is good enough for me. Also, I did find a way to give away the Husker memorabilia. I talked about, I am going to still give away hats. I talked about if I hit 100 likes, which I did hit 100 likes on a couple of videos, so I'm going to be drawing, and I could only, out of the 207 subscribers I have, I could only see about 45 subscribers because most people's subscriptions are on private. But I do plan to give away Husker memorabilia and also game tickets. But I did have a few people that stated they didn't want to, they really didn't want to make their subscriptions public. And so I had to figure out another way to include everybody. So someone brought up about setting up a Patreon account. Really didn't know much about Patreon accounts or even what Patreon was, so I had to research that. So I did set up a Patreon account. Then I'm going to start giving away the monthly memorabilia and then the game tickets and merchandise to the Patreon members. So if you want to be included in the monthly memorabilia, there's a link to the Patreon account also in the description. But I am going to draw from the subscribers to give away the first couple hats here, because I did state that's what I was going to do once it hit 100 likes. But after this, I'm going to switch over and just make it part of the Patreon members, along with the game tickets. And plus there'll be also special video content. Just the first item I'm giving away is a Heisman football. It's a signed football by all 3 Heisman winners, Johnny Rogers, Mike Rozier, and Eric Crouch. So if you want to be part of that giveaway, go sign up to be a Patreon member, and you'll be part of that. Again, I want to thank everyone for all their support, and thank you for all your prayers. I really do appreciate it. So until the next video, go Big Red.